Have you ever had the experience where your worst day turns out to be one of your best days? Or one of the things you thought was the best day ever turned out to be the worst day? That's been the lived experience of today's guest, and I can't wait for you to hear her stories.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Before we dive in, I want to share something exciting. One of the most powerful things about the sober space right now is how much we can learn from each other and how many opportunities there are to create new collaborations. That's exactly what Amplify Sober Voices is about. It's a one-day in-person event happening January 15th, 2026 in Orlando, bringing together speakers and writers, podcasters and coaches and creators who want to take their sober story and turn it into impact. Imagine a room full of people who get it, all sharing ideas, sparking conversations, and building partnerships that will shape the future of this movement. If you've been looking for the right place to connect and grow, this is it. Join us at amplifysobervoices.com. I would love to see you there. Now, my guest today is a personal friend of mine. Heather McGuire is a dental hygienist. She has worked in all aspects of this field. She has worked in clinical hygiene. She's worked in sales. She ran and managed an entire division of hygienists in multiple different practices. And now she's running the education department at Philips Oral Care. So I just cannot wait for you to get to know Heather like I know Heather. And welcome to the program, my friend.
Thank you. It is always such an honor to be sharing space with you, and I just adore you and all the work that you do. So it's my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get into so many things, but I always like to start because I think it frames for us sort of this story arc of where did alcohol show up in your family of origin when you were a kid?
Gosh, I don't think I have any memories without alcohol in them. Uh,
Mm,
my father has had experiences with alcohol. My mother was never much of a drinker. I started experimenting in probably the end of middle school, eighth grade, seventh, eighth grade. I was always very uncomfortable in my own body. I never felt like I fit in. I would always kind of try to paper down myself together and imagine if I had your this and your this, and I would kind of try to craft my perfect body. And I was so uncomfortable on the inside all of the time. And I found alcohol, and then it didn't matter. So it was part of my life from a very early age. And I would have bouts of, I'm going to loosely say sobriety, where I would stop drinking. I'd be abstinent for a while and then come full force. But alcohol had been part of my story for quite some time. I am 8.5 years sober now. So I got sober in
yay.
2017. And I was, gosh, do the math, I think 38 when I got sober. So it was a pretty long run for me.
And was there some precipitous event that finally got you to the point where it was like, this is enough?
Mm. There wasn't one catastrophic event. It was a series of events that led up to I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. I was just ashamed of who I was. I was ashamed of the choices I was making. I was a single mom of three teenage boys at the time, and I was struggling to keep my career afloat. I was a clinical hygienist at the time, And life was just a struggle. I couldn't take care of myself. I just couldn't take care of them. I wore all these different masks. I was a mom. I was a PTA mom. I was a baseball mom. I was a hygienist. I was an alcoholic that desperately needed help. I was a partier. I was a friend. And I would wear these different masks at different occasions. And for a long time, I was okay with knowing who I was and what realm. And then I started to blur the lines. And, I would come to work a little bit too hungover, or I, would think that drinking starting earlier in the day would be a better idea. And I just started to blur the lines between the masks. So my breaking point was truly just when I couldn't look at myself anymore.
Mhm. So you got sober, and what were some of the early things that you noticed about yourself and your life? I mean, I know for many people, because we didn't finish growing up, there was a different sort of experience of what that was like for you.
Um, I, I was a teenage mom on top of everything else. So I do feel like I did kind of, I grew and I grew up in one sense because I had children to take care of. But when I got sober, I around a year sober. The first year I didn't do anything but get sober, and I was really blessed. Like I said, I was clinical hygienist, and the doctor I worked for, the dentist, was actually sober. He had had 6 years
Yeah.
sober, and it's funny because when I got the job, I would go to new offices because I ran out of excuses. I would call in sick, and I would run out of excuses, so I would have no choice but to quit and start all over again. And then I would have all of these pools of excuses of why I couldn't come in again. And as soon as I had got that job, I was teetering on knowing I needed to get sober, but struggling with making that final commitment. And he was sober. And I thought, oh boy, like my lies aren't going to work here. He's going to catch on really quick. And so that helped in being honest with him. And I have to say, though, I was really afraid to get sober for a long time because I had a healthcare license. I was afraid if I went to rehab that what was that going to look like for my dental hygiene license? What was the industry going to think of me if I said I was a healthcare professional and I am also an alcoholic? So I struggled with that for a long time, of how to ask for the help, because I didn't know a lot of people that were in the industry and in healthcare that stood up and said, I've been here, I've done that. So when I met that dentist for the first time, I was intimidated and inspired at the same time. Because I thought, well, if you can do it and you're open and you have a successful practice, then just maybe I have hope too.
Hmm. So did you tell him when you actually did get sober?
Yes. So I had worked there a couple months, and then I had went to my first, I work a 12-step program. And I had went to my first meeting and I collected my first coin of 24 hours. And I had walked in and said, I think I'm going to join your club. And he was a great support to me, and he's still a dear friend. Um,
Mm.
and I needed that. I needed the place to feel safe, and also the accountability of knowing I couldn't get away with all these little white lies. That helped me start to take the masks off to genuinely step in to who I have become.
And did you tell anybody else in your professional life?
Just in that office, really, they had known, but that was it. I was still really nervous of what that would look like. And
Hmm.
then the doctor would start to introduce me to some of the patients that were also in different aspects of healthcare. And I'll never forget the first time I met a medical doctor that my dentist had known from the program. And he had come in and said, like, I'm in your club type thing. And I was just so surprised. I don't know why. I thought I was the only one. I had so much guilt and shame around I should know better or I should be able to do better because I'm highly educated and I just felt like a failure. So once I started to see other people um, just like me, it really gave me a sense of belonging and inspiration. And that's one of the reasons why I choose to share my story, is so that if there is any hygienist out there, or dentist, or anybody, any professional sitting in the corner of their office in their operatory in shame, thinking, how did I get here again? How am I hungover? How am I still drunk and showed up to work the next day? Like, what am I doing to my life? And so afraid to put their hands out and say, I need help. And I just hope that by sharing my story, somebody else can be brave enough to step into their next version.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And honestly, it's one of the things that I admire the most about you is just how open you are about your sober walk. And it's been an inspiration to me personally. So thank you.
Thank
And that's
you.
really what this podcast is about, is amplifying sober voices just to normalize it, just to take away some of that stigma. And I mean, I got sober 20 years ago when the stigma was hardcore, but even 2017, it wasn't a picnic. I feel like after the pandemic, things have really shifted into a different gear, but it was tough. It was really tough.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Heather, I kind of want to fast forward to that moment that you have shared with me about when you were in sales. Tell me about that best day.
I've had a couple really defining moments of sobriety and in my career, and this was definitely one of them. So I had left clinical hygiene. I got sober in 2017. I left clinical hygiene in 19 because I had had that stirring of wanting to do something bigger, greater, and grander with my career. So I had the opportunity to go onto the vendor sales side. And I remember sitting at my very first national sales meeting. I was 2 weeks into my role, and I sat at the national sales meeting, and man, it felt like the people up on stage were at the Oscars. They were in gorgeous ballroom dresses, and their names were in lights, and they were getting awards and trophies and trips. And I was awestruck. And I said, I'm going to do that. I want to be on stage next year. So fast
Pretty
forward a
lofty
year.
goal for 2 weeks in.
Yeah, it was. Never, I had no sales experience, had no idea what I was doing, but here I go. I'm gonna have my name in lights next year. Well, if I know anything to be true about the alcoholic determination, is we do hard things. So fast forward a year, and I was number 5 in my company. And with that came an all expense paid trip to Rome. And wow, mm, I felt like I was transported into a life that I never thought possible. I had the career, I had my sobriety, I had a good relationship at home. Everything was really good. And walking that stage and collecting that trophy was
Mm.
just like the clinch of it. Like, I did it. I can do this. So it was definitely the highlight of my career because there was a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that went into being able to cross that stage.
And what a gift of sobriety, right?
Yes, yes, it was all of the things that just came to be in one moment, and I couldn't have been more elated and proud of my accomplishments. And then I had the biggest crash of my career. National sales meeting, we were doing a team bonding exercise, and the whole company was doing it. We were in our regional teams, and this was the day after that award ceremony. And the team bonding experience was a scavenger hunt through the downtown area that we were in. And we had to collect playing cards at all these different places. We had clues and we had to go find these cards. And the majority of the scavenger hunt took us to bars and pubs. And at every place that you stopped, you got your playing card, and you got a shot or a beer or something to celebrate that you found your next clue. And by the time that game was over, we all ended at a big bar. And that was going to be our evening activity, was these big giant yard games and this outside bar and open alcohol and snacks passed around. And I was hot, I was lonely, I was tired, I was overstimulated. I kept having this constant battle in my brain of watching my team have shots, and they tried their best to help me fit in, and would get me shots of water. They tried. They really tried. So here they're cheersing, and I've got my shot glass of water. But by the time I got to that end bar where we should all be celebrating at the best time in my career, I locked myself in the bathroom, and I sat on the bathroom floor and I cried. And I called my husband and I said, I don't want to drink, but I don't know how to be sober. And I want to be here because this is the best week of my career, and all I want to do is go home. I was so torn and so conflicted on the inside, and I felt so alone. And my only answer and my only safe place was to lock myself in that bathroom and just wish the night away. And there was one person in that organization who I knew was on a sober journey as well. And my husband had said, reach out to him. And so I called him from the bathroom floor and said, I'm afraid to open the door. I don't know what I just don't know. And I just felt so isolated. I felt so alone. I felt like a baby almost too. Like, grow up. You're a big girl. Why can't you handle this? Other people are drinking. So many mix of emotions going through. And thankfully that one person reached out his hand, and we had left that and went to a meeting and got cheeseburgers after, and I made it through that night. But I called our HR department and anybody who would listen after that and said, like, can we do better? This was my first introduction to how do we do better as an industry? How do we do better as a company? And the example I used to her was, if we knew that there were people that were in wheelchairs on our teams, we would not necessarily plan mountain climbing as a team building activity. But that's an obvious condition. Alcoholism and addiction is not obvious. And not everybody is vocal in their recovery. A lot of people keep it private, but we're forcing people to be in these environments that they can't physically, mentally, and emotionally handle. So if we wouldn't plan mountain climbing for a team because all of our team can't physically do it, why do we choose bar hopping? Why do we have to have cocktail hour as team bonding? Why do we have to do these things? Is there something else we can do to bring us together other than surround our choices with alcohol? And if alcohol is part of it, can we have some non-alcoholic options as well?
And what was the HR and company response?
It was, yeah, we understand. Yes, we can do better. We'll think about that. We'll put something into planning for next year. And then, I think I was the minority, and I think they were just lip service at that time of, yep, we can do something better, but nothing better happened. Nothing, it's still the same.
Yeah.
So I think though, for some of I just don't know if organizations know how to do better. I think
Yeah,
nobody deliberately wants to set out to help to have other people struggle, but I just think there's a disconnect as far as what do I do and how do I do something different, which is what I
absolutely.
want to help change.
And I'm just going to take this moment to plug Laura's book, The Inclusive Event Planner, because she wrote this specifically for that reason. Because how would people know? It's all we've ever grown up with. It's all we've ever experienced. And so we're asking people to break out of a mold that is centuries old.
Yes.
Um, so I want to get to another story, but before we do, I just wanted to stop to and ask you at that point, other than that one person in your company, like, did you know other people in the industry who weren't drinking and were able to
No,
connect?
no. I really felt like I was a lone wolf. And I was still afraid too of that black eye or the stigma that I might get if I was vocal about it. So I was
Mhm.
still pretty reserved, but I didn't know anybody else. And that's why I've been so grateful to have the connections with Sober Life Rocks and just the comfort that it gives me to know even if a
Well,
member of
I want you to tell the story of how we met,
Yeah. So I again wanted to grow and I was at Chicago Midwinter
which is a
and
conference every year.
dental conference every year and just started putting the word out like I am a woman in sobriety and I'm trying to find my way. And because of the work that you and Laura have done, people know you and everybody's like, "Oh, you're sober. Let me introduce you to this group of people." And funny enough, I met you guys first at a tiki bar at a at a networking event that I kind of reluctantly went to because I thought, oh great, another networking event at a bar. This is swell. But I walked in and there was a mocktail menu that had the beautiful drinks with the fruit and the umbrellas. And honestly, that was the first time I felt like I could still belong in an event because nobody else knew it what I had in my cup. Not that it's anybody else's business, but sometimes a lot of times we internalize that. So
Mhm.
I got to have the really cool tiki guy and the fruity sticks coming out of it. And I got to walk around and hold this pretty cup and got to meet so many other people
There
that
was
brought
like eight
that.
or 10 of us there
Yes. It
in
was
that one little
incredible.
bar. Yeah.
And the inspiration that I got really propelled me now to continue to share my journey out loud. And I joined Sober Life Rocks that night, and I have been doing everything I can to help promote and find my place here to help change the industry from the inside.
Yeah. And it was such a blessing for us to meet you because you have done so much for us and so much with us and really been that voice in the wilderness to help support this mission. So thank you.
Been a pleasure.
So Heather, I've wanted to have you on this podcast for like a year and just things haven't worked out. And then you and I had a conversation last week that brought me to tears and I said it's time. We need to do a shout out to all industries. And so would you be willing to tell that story?
Yes. So, this was the other one that kind of rocked me, right? My winning Rome was my first pivotal moment that inspired me to do more. And then over this last couple weeks, I had another experience. I'm now in a position where I am in many, many conferences and events in the dental industry. And I'm in a position where I get to sponsor a lot of events, which is great because I love to be an industry partner. So I was at an event and I had made friends with a neighboring vendor. And she's young and beautiful and new and all of the things. And,
Probably just like you when you first started at your first sales job.
Yeah, yeah, she reminded me a lot of me. And cocktail hour on the exhibit floor started at 4 o'clock. And I'm sure no matter what industry you're in, when you listen to this, you can relate. So you get cocktail hour with the exhibitors, and you're walking around with your little glass of wine, um, and then you have the cocktail hour pre-dinner, and then you have an awards ceremony happening at the end, where again it's beer and wine and some mixed drinks, and then the past appetizers. So that was the setup of this evening. So this dear girl, I could tell, was kind of going downhill quick. And by the awards reception, you know, um, free alcohol had definitely gotten the best of her. And there was one woman who kind of took her and tended to her, and a situation that had to be taken care of that I kind of helped out in. And the next day I woke up and she was really on my heart. So I went and I found her, and I wanted to talk to her just as how to network a little bit better and how to handle these things. And what I didn't expect was what came next. And she looked at me with big tear-filled eyes and said, "I think I might have a problem with alcohol." And now she didn't know I was sober. And she just said, "I think I might have a problem with alcohol. And I don't know how to do this job. I don't know how to be in this industry and say that out loud. And I think I'm going to quit." She had so much guilt and so much shame and all of those feelings that you wake up with the next day, all of that ick and that heaviness and the questioning of what did I do last night?
Mhm.
And I just remembered being that person. So, woman to woman, I talked to her and said, "Nope, we're going to brush our shoulders off and you're not going to quit. Okay, but we're gonna grow from this experience, and you can be sober in this industry." And I am sober, and I got to share with her a little bit of my story. But what really is getting to me is, as industry leaders, as speakers, as the key opinion leaders, as the event planners, as the people in the companies who sponsor the events, we are the ones that have the ability to make the change. And I don't think we're showing up enough. We have the ability as companies to say, "Okay, yes, I will sponsor your cocktail hour, but what does that look like?" Because when you got a couple plates of chicken nuggets floating around and a couple, coconut battered shrimp, and you got no carbs, and you got no alcohol free drinks, and you got to have a drink ticket to go get a club soda, like that's a recipe for disaster. So, using Laura's book and having a mocktail menu of 2 to 3 drink choices, because even when you drink, there comes a point where you want to have a break for a minute and have something else to drink other than a bottle of water. So what mocktails can we make? What foods can, making sure there's enough food for those of us who drink, because even those who don't have a problem with alcohol, when we're overtired, overstimulated, dehydrated, we've been talking all day as speakers and at the vendor booth, like we're already at a disadvantage. One drink can hit us in the head a lot differently than if we were just sitting at home on a lazy Saturday.
Mhm.
So, how do we do better for the non drinkers for reasons that they have problems with alcohol, the non drinkers because of I just don't want to drink? And how do we do better for the drinkers to make sure that they don't just have a really bad day?
Well, and I want to tell a story of another conference in the dental space that just happened a couple weeks ago. One of our Sober Life Rocks members reached out to the meeting planner and said, hey, we need to do better, because this particular conference is one well known in the industry as like the party conference. And so she said, we got to do better. It's not that we don't want it to be fun, but we need to include things for people who don't drink. And what they ended up doing was they had basically two sequential parties. They had a party that was from like 5 to 9, where they brought in a live 80s band. And at all the bars, they had a mocktail menu with Sober Life Rocks in the bottom with 2 or 3 different choices so that people could just point to something and not have to shout out loud, like, hey, what do you have that's non-alcoholic, right? And they had a non-alcoholic beer that was on the counter along with the alcohol beers. So again, people can just point. What ended up happening was that they ran out of the non-alcoholic beers halfway through the night. The mocktails were being served more than the cocktails, and the organizers were stunned. Now, fast forward, 9 o'clock ends. Starting at 10 o'clock is another party with a loud DJ, the dark lights, the dark room, and alcohol flowing like crazy. So that people who wanted to continue to party had that option. But those who choose to go to bed at a reasonable hour, knowing they're getting up the next day to attend education, still could have a fun time. And studies today show, I don't know if you know this, Heather, but studies today show that 80% of non-alcoholic beverages are bought by people who do drink.
I did just read that study. That's very interesting.
And so they want their first glass of wine to unwind from the day, and then they want to switch to something else.
Yes.
So you're 100% right that we need to do better. Like the whole purpose of this podcast is to amplify our sober voices. And we've been talking a lot about how can we use our platforms to speak about this in a way that normalizes it. But what was so important to me about bringing you on was we also can be change agents. We can demand differently. We
Yes.
can gently suggest differently. We can be the change that we want to see and not accept the status quo as just something we have to suffer through.
And that's where it all starts. Every change that's ever been made in history and any different segment of change all starts there. It has to start with the people who will join together and say, like, we're missing the mark here. And I'm grateful and that I'm confident enough to do that. Because the other thing I want to encourage is what was missing at this last event was the human connection, where there was a lot of people talking about the incidents that had happened when one person drank too much. Nobody leaned into it and talked to this person. Nobody went to the event planner and said, hey, I feel like I was the only squeaky wheel out of 500 people there. So human to human, if we can do better and talk to each other instead of around each other.
Mm.
If we can have that compassion to take somebody out of the space when they're uncomfortable instead of snickering in the corner and watching somebody crash and burn. There was a huge aspect of the human condition that just failed this weekend. It really did. And that's what broke my heart the most too. And I just think we can do better on so many levels. And my hope is that the people who are listening to this are the ones who frequent the conferences, are the ones who can notice the patterns and see the same vendors or the same, and not be afraid to go up to somebody and say, like, hey, there's this organization out there that you might want to check into, or go up to the event planner and say, I will sponsor you under these conditions. Um, there's a lot that we can do, but we have to be brave to move into that space.
Mm. This is why I adore you so much, because you don't just sit back and watch silently. From the day after your national sales award moment, you spoke up about it. And when you see something like this, you speak up about it. And to me, that is so brave. And I'm so, so proud of you. How does it feel inside when you're doing those things?
Oh, it's scary. Be scared, but do it anyways. It's always that the big voice that says, "Oh, don't go talk to that person. Like, just mind your own business. You don't need to get involved in this." Or, "Oh,
Mhm.
what is your company going to say about you?" Or, "What are other people going to say about you?" But it's that small voice inside that urges me to say, "Go forward and lean in and be uncomfortable and be afraid and do it anyways." And you know what? Not everybody's going to have that. Not everybody's going to be brave enough. And that's where I want to be the voice for those people, because for as many people who have come up to me after I've mentioned on a big mega stage that I'm in sobriety, and I've had podcasts out in the past that say I'm in sobriety and posts on social media, for every one person that comes up to me and says, "Hey, me too," there's somebody else who comes up to me and says, "How are you so brave to say it? Because I'm afraid of what somebody is going to say about me." So I will take those people on. I will carry them. You don't have to be loud in everywhere, but I encourage anybody who is not loud in on the front lines to find a partner of somebody who is on the front lines. And
Mhm.
that's where Sober Life Rocks can come together with these partnerships, because I can be the voice of so many others that don't want to share their story out loud. I will be your story, but I have to know that you exist and I want to help you. And I think all the members of Sober Life Rocks feel the same way. And it's a great community that I'm so excited to be part of and watch grow and spread. And I got my cheerleader pom poms out.
Heather, thank you. Thank you for your authenticity. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for representing so many voices who aren't able or willing yet to speak up, because that is holding the light in the wilderness that others can follow.
Thank you for creating the space for me and others like me to do it. And
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing the changes that'll come in the industry.
So, for those of you who have listened to this, I just want to ask you, is there that small, quiet voice that's been stirring in you as you've seen things that you wish were different? Is there a moment that you can speak up and be afraid at the same time? Or maybe you've listened to this and you're ready to join some more advocacy in your industry. Either which way, if you're ready to explore how your sober voice can inspire others, whether, the sort of things we've talked about today, or writing a book, or podcasting, or simply living as an example, please join us at Amplify Sober Voices this January in Orlando. Your story doesn't have to stay small. It can ripple out further than you ever imagined. Thank you.